Hi everyone, I'm Scott. Welcome to another episode of WIS, aka What I've Seen, What I've Skipped. Little update video on the month of January of this year. What I saw on DVD, what I saw in the theater, and what I decided to skip in the theater. So on DVD, first I watched Maggie, directed by Henry Hobson. This is a movie where Arnold Schwarzenegger's daughter, played by Abigail Breslin, contracts the Resident Evil or 28 Days Later or whatever you want to call it virus, and she's slowly turning into a member of the undead over the course of a few weeks. I really like the concept for this movie. Jolie Richardson is Arnold Schwarzenegger's wife, but she's not Abigail Breslin's daughter. He had basically, I think his wife died or something like that, and she has two kids of her own. When things start to get bad around the homestead, she takes her two sons and leaves him to take care of her. And by take care of, I mean possibly, kill his daughter, basically, who's going to be a zombie. So I like the concept for this movie very much, and I like the way it plays for the most part, but there's a couple of things that I don't like. The visual style is lots of very dark handheld camera work, which is really sort of tough on my eyes. It's just made for an unpleasant viewing experience. And the other thing I didn't like about it was the very end just sort of ends a little bit before it ought to end, really. It's just sort of like a cop-out ending, where something is about to happen and then the movie ends and you don't really see anything happen. And it's just like, come on, this is sort of tough subject matter. We could do with an actual ending here to actually see what happens at the end. So I found that kind of unsatisfying. Overall, I liked it, but I can't really recommend it. Then I saw Aloha by Cameron Crowe. This is with Bradley Cooper as a military man and Emma Stone as his escort on a Hawaiian military base. And Rachel McAdams plays his ex-wife, and there's a whole sort of complicated situation involving getting approval from the citizens on the island to launch this new satellite, which is actually possibly a weapon of some kind. Very disjointed movie, kind of confused, really unclear, an unclear storyline overall. And there's sort of a romance that is sort of brewing between the two characters, Emma Stone and Bradley Cooper, but it's really sort of all up in the air at the end. I don't know. This movie, I can hardly remember what actually happened in the end. I didn't see this movie that long ago, just like a little over a month ago. I sort of remember what happens up to the end, but how do they leave things? I really don't remember, and that's never a good sign, so I couldn't recommend that one either. Not that I recommend any Cameron Crowe movie, because I really haven't liked any of his movies at all. So that's sad. I finally caught up with the end of the tour, which is something that I wanted to see in the theater but really couldn't. It's directed by James Ponsoldt, who did The Spectacular Now, which is an excellent movie, and a movie called Smashed with Mary Elizabeth Winstead that I also really liked, and he's got a movie coming out later this year, or possibly early next year, called The Circle. I believe it's Ponsoldt that's doing that one. Anyway, end of the tour is about the interview between a Rolling Stone journalist named Dave Lipsky and the novelist David Foster Wallace, who wrote Infinite Jest. And they spent several days together. Jesse Eisenberg plays Lipsky, the writer, and he is actually quite likable for most of this movie, unlike the typical Jesse Eisenberg performance where he's not all that likable. Jason Segel plays David Foster Wallace, and he's a very different kind of character for him. I really like it when actors sort of disappear into a part and you forget that you're watching a particular actor. It's not that he's changed his look, because he's got long hair and glasses and wears a bandana throughout most of the movie, so he's not as recognizable as he normally is. But it's mostly just his demeanor, the way he speaks. And I think also EJ, who sort of inspired me to do these updates now, also reviewed that movie very recently and liked it a lot. if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah, I agree that Jason Segel is quite good in this movie. Really sort of gets, it's not like I have seen any footage of David Foster Wallace at all, but he definitely made me forget who he really was and really sort of became this character. One thing that I thought was kind of interesting about this is that at a number of points during the film, he says to Jesse Eisenberg, "Hey, can we go off the record? Please stop the tape." And he says, "Sure, sure." But then, of course, we see the conversation continue. It's depicted in the film. So whatever it was that David Foster Wallace wanted to be off the record is no longer actually off the record because they dramatize it in this movie. Yeah, it's a real good movie, real good. And, the acting is just first rate. And a lot of course, the dialogue is taken directly from the interview, from the tapes, I suppose, that were made during the time that they spent together. But yeah, real good movie, terrific movie. Another terrific movie, Sleeping with Other People. This is a romantic comedy that was directed by Leslie Headland. Not really familiar with her, but basically the main characters are Jason Sudeikis and Alison Brie. They hooked up in college. It turns out they basically lost their virginities to each other. And then years later, after many sort of fleeting relationships, they meet again and decide to just basically be friends, but sort of share their sexual misadventures with each other. Meanwhile, Alison Brie has this sort of self-destructive relationship with Adam Scott over the course of many years. He's sort of like, he has this hold on her that's really tough to explain, but she keeps going back to him despite the fact that he's married. Meanwhile, Jason Sudeikis is trying to coax her away from him, and it's obvious that they really have strong feelings for each other. Really good movie. Really like this movie a lot. So I definitely recommend it. There's a good supporting cast as well, though off the top of my head it's hard to remember exactly who all those guys were. And finally on DVD I watched Z for Zachariah, which is a movie that I read about when it played at a few film festivals. It takes place after a nuclear catastrophe of some kind, either an atomic bomb or perhaps a nuclear plant meltdown. There's lots of radiation everywhere except in this valley where the main character, Margot Robbie, is living. Her family basically lived in this farm in the valley, and there was a chapel there where her father used to preach at. But her whole family has been gone for some time now. Presumably they're dead, and she's just basically making a go of it. Planting vegetables and just surviving all alone. And then Chiwetel Ejiofor, who of course was the main character in 12 Years a Slave and was also in The Martian, comes along. And they ends up staying at her place, and they end up working together and living together, and basically just valuing each other's company. And there's the possibility of romance brewing between the two of them because it's just the two of them out there. But then a third guy comes along, Chris Pine. He's been out in the wilderness and he needs a place to stay. So they end up working together and living together and eating together, and this creates a lot of tension between the characters. There's this project, Chiwetel Ejiofor, there's a waterfall nearby. The water is bad, it's got radiation in it. But they can use the waterfall to basically operate a wheel, a giant water wheel, that will power a generator, which will give them electricity, and that's very important. They want to be able to preserve food in the refrigerator. They need to be able to heat the place in the wintertime when it gets cold. They need electricity to do that. So it becomes this project. But it means basically tearing down the church because they need the flat planks of wood that have already been milled. They can't just cut down trees because they can't mill them. And Margot Robbie doesn't want to let go of her dad's chapel, but she eventually realizes that it's something that they need, so they get to work on that. So that's a project to occupy their time with, but in the meantime, there's all this sort of tension between them. Is Margot Robbie going to favor one of the guys over the other? I like this movie a lot. The ending is really ambiguous. And unlike Aloha, I favor this ending quite a bit, just because it's one of those things where you sort of have to make up your own mind about what actually happened and what's going to happen, rather than have it just sort of handed to you by the people that made the movie. So that kind of thing I liked. It worked really well, and I enjoyed the movie very much, so I'd recommend it. In the theater, luckily for Christmas, I received a couple of gift cards to local movie chains, and so I started using them quite a bit. I saw Brooklyn, which is nominated for Best Picture. It's directed by John Crowley. It's a very good movie. Saoirse Ronan, of course, plays the girl who immigrates from Ireland to New York, and then is sort of torn between those two lives. I saw Carol, directed by Todd Haynes. It's based on a Patricia Highsmith novel called The Price of Salt. It's about a girl who works in a department store in 1950s New York. Actually, that's the second movie. That and Brooklyn both involve a young lady living in New York in the 50s. Anyway, she works at a department store, and she meets Cate Blanchett, who's a divorcee, and they begin a relationship that is sort of like very sort of, they sort of edge closer and closer together, until finally it becomes a full-blown romance. But her complication, Cate Blanchett's complication, of course, is that she is seeking custody of her daughter, or is it her son? No, I'm pretty sure it's her daughter, from Kyle Chandler, her ex-husband. And Kyle Chandler's character is not necessarily a bad guy, but he's not above using her past and the relationships she's had with other women against her, so things get kind of hairy from there. This was a movie that I was really looking forward to seeing, but I just felt it was maybe a little bit too distant and cold, and I didn't really connect with the characters as much as I would have liked to. So it's a well-made movie technically, but you know, it's nominated for cinematography, I think. And I think both, I'm not sure if Cate Blanchett's nominated, but I know, I can't even remember who was nominated from this movie. Sorry about that. I'm being a little vague there. But I recommend it with some reservations. Wasn't a movie that I loved, but it has some value there. I saw Quentin Tarantino's new film, The Hateful Eight. I got to see the Roadshow version, 70mm. That was nice. I did a whole video on that movie, so that's another video on my channel. I saw The Big Short, which is nominated for Best Picture. It's directed by Adam McKay. It's got Brad Pitt and Christian Bale, and not Will Ferrell, Steve Carell, and Ryan Gosling. They're all finance guys that spout the housing bubble about to burst in 2008. And they sort of bet against it and hope to make money that way, but the complications come around when, despite the fact that everything is going wrong, none of the people that regulate the business want to say so, and so they get further and further in debt when they thought they'd be making money hand over fist. There's, of course, a lot of fun cameos in this movie, and sort of a lot of direct address to camera, breaking the fourth wall, and just all these funny little asides. It's a well-made movie. I can't say that I love it, but I found it very amusing and, of course, infuriating as well. And finally, I saw Joy, which I spoke a little bit about on the Collab channel. I'm part of the Movie Reviewers 100. It's David O. Russell's latest film. Robert De Niro, Jennifer Lawrence, Bradley Cooper, they're all in it. And overall, I liked the movie very much. I thought it was a good, strong picture. I actually like it more than American Hustle. And it's more of a drama than the last few. The last few movies, I would say, are dramatic comedies. Movies that I would consider comedies, but are more serious. They're not outright farces. Whereas this is a drama with some humor in it, but it's mostly a drama involving this woman played by whose name is Joy, played by Jennifer Lawrence, who's trying to just pull herself out of the bad financial straits that she's in. She's in debt. She might lose her house, which is falling apart. She's got both of her parents living with her and her ex-husband. Her life's kind of a mess, and she's just looking for a way to get out of it. And she comes up with an idea for a new mop, which she tries to sell and make money off of. And there's a whole bunch of obstacles there. And I like the movie a lot. It's good. And finally, one movie that I ended up skipping, but may end up seeing in the next week or two, is The Revenant, which came out in early January this year. It's got a whole bunch of Oscar nominations. And of what I've read of this movie, I'm anticipating not liking it. Maybe liking the look of it, but what I've read about this movie so far, from people whose opinions I trust, say that it's a rather slight and not very original story told in an incredibly technically magnificent way. It looks great, you know, it's a well-made movie, but there's just not a lot at the core of it. I know some people really think that it's amazing, and I'm looking forward to seeing a couple of particular scenes in the movie, but it's a 2.5-hour movie in which Leo is basically crawling around in very, very cold environment looking for the people who wronged him. The whole movie is shot like at sunset. That's really weird. I don't understand that at all. I know the lighting looks great, but you know, even though it takes place in the wintertime, the sun has to get a little higher in the sky sometime. So yeah, I will see that movie eventually, but it's not something I've been eager to see. By the way, as far as Leo goes, we're going to have a theme week on the Collab channel involving him, and I think I'll end up reviewing something other than The Revenant. I think The Revenant's going to get reviewed, but not by me. I'll do a different Leo movie. Anyway, that was my WIS video for January of this year, and of course at the end of this month I'll do a video on February, what I've seen and what I've skipped. I hope you'll tune in for that. Thanks very much for watching. See you again real soon. Bye.